Welcome back to Confront Your Mind. I'm Jolynn,
I'm Tiffany. Join us as we talk about how to confront the uncomfortable in life,
while also allowing space for laughter as we learn. Welcome back.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here. Today we're going to be talking about emotional awareness and kind of getting into like what it is, what it means, why do we need to be emotionally aware? Like, why is that important?
Because it is.
Yeah, because it is. Because we said it's important.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true.
No.
We might need to give some more reasons.
That's reason enough. No. Just joking. But yeah, that's what we're going to do today is kind of dig into emotional awareness. And yeah, we'll get it started with a definition like we usually do. And so Tiffany's going to
let me grab our definition
share
here.
the definition she found with us.
All right. So my favorite definition that I found, because I looked at a lot of them and some of them I was like, I don't like that.
Get that out of here.
Yeah. So the definition I found was the ability to recognize and make sense of your own emotions and the emotions of others. Because I liked how it mentioned how, your own emotions and the emotions of other people.
Yeah, I did. I noticed that too in the definition. I was like, no, that's actually, I think something that's really helpful is like being aware of not only your emotions, but also the impact you have on other people's emotions too.
And just being aware of other people, like other people's emotions and like their emotions.
Their emotions, yeah.
As well.
So like, why is emotional awareness important to you?
I'm going to try to talk. I wasn't crying, I was sneezing. Okay, so the reason I think emotional awareness is important is, excuse all the sniffling.
We got an allergy queen on our hands.
It's true. She needs some Benadryl. Okay. Do you have some Benadryl?
I do.
I might take one.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Okay. But to answer your question.
Yes.
I think, I'm so sorry about that.
You don't have to apologize for sneezing.
To answer, yeah, thank you. That's just a literal human function.
Yeah.
I feel like it's like more of a dysfunction because, an allergic reaction is fighting your own immune system.
Anyways.
Your face. Okay. So, emotional awareness is important. Because for me, it's important.
Yeah, why is it important for you?
It's important for me because having emotional awareness and increasing my emotional awareness has helped me to be able to regulate my emotions. Because I feel like, how I feel like the first step of, for me at least, the first step in emotion regulation is like being able to identify the emotion. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's why, like, for me, unless I can name the emotion and actually figure out what emotion I'm currently having, it's really hard for me to regulate it. Because sometimes once I realize like, oh, I'm feeling actually really angry about that and I didn't really know that, then I'm like, okay, so now I can kind of go deeper into that and kind of not fix it, but, help regulate it.
Yeah. Your eyes are so watery. It's like, I just keep thinking you're going to cry. But I know it's just your allergies because I'm like, okay, wait, do we need to pause? But we're good. But no, I think I really like what you said about that too. And I think, being able to be aware and grow in that awareness is what's super important. So.
And that's where we've talked about it several times and I mention it a lot, but the feelings wheel and being able to use that can be a really good tool if you aren't good with naming your emotions.
Yeah, definitely. What?
I'm sorry. I just feel like I'm crying and what I'm talking about is not that emotion. What's something that you think is important about emotional awareness?
Yes. So I think emotional awareness is one of the most important things because a lot of the times emotions are what drives people and what drives us to do things, especially very intense things, right? Because emotions are very intense. And if we're not aware of our emotions, I think it can actually be pretty destructive. Especially if we're acting out of intensity or passion.
That's a really good point.
And so I think that's one of the most important reasons about being emotionally aware is that you do need to have it because one, it one, it also helps you kind of key into like what other people are experiencing and maybe like when to pump the brakes or like maybe when to like push a little bit harder or, you know, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
But I also think of like the fact too of like it's really big in almost every aspect of life. You know, it's not just like these big like intense moments, right? Because emotions do drive us. Like emotion, like love drives us to like give somebody a hug, or compassion drives us to like sit down and talk to somebody, or you know, anger drives us to like start fights with people, you know.
That's a really good point that like almost every action that we take is like driven from an emotion.
Yes, that's like why I think it is such a crucial part of it, because you know, when we like don't have that awareness, we're like putting it on other people, right? Well, it's like, well, he stole $50,000 from my bank account, and like, you know, that is really crazy, but like like he stole $50,000 from my bank account, like, you know, screw him kind of thing. Like I'm gonna go like key his car,
Yeah.
you know.
But it's like that revenge comes
Right.
from like being hurt
Yeah, it comes from
or
that
being wronged
anger
or
and like,
being angry.
yeah, disappointment, anger, and so like, or like, man, like, or like if like cheating, like in relationships too, like, you know, people like there's so many songs. It's like I'm right now. He's probably sitting around something. She's like, I'm gonna key his car, but like,
Right.
I've dug my horse into the side.
Dug her key.
Dug my key into the side of his pretty little souped up four-wheel drive. Carved my name into his leather seats.
I
Right.
took a Louisville Slugger to both headlights.
What's the next one?
Slash the hole
Pulling all four tires.
Yeah.
Maybe next time he'll think
before he cheats.
Yeah, America's Next amazing singers right here.
We should go on The Voice.
Yeah, definitely. Or maybe, yeah, The Voice. We're going to get real far. But no, I think it's like they're like songs are based off emotion, movies are based off of emotion, like almost everything. Video games play into your emotions, like books play into your emotions, like all these entertainment aspects are like what drives us emotionally. And if we don't have emotional awareness, then we are out of touch with what drives us. And so I think it's like one of those super important things to like just begin to be aware of if you're not, you know, because I think a lot of times people are observant in some regards. Some people are not observant. But I think being able to be observant of like yourself and like what you're experiencing is important, because that is emotional awareness. And without emotional awareness, like really scary things can happen, right? Like, you know, realizing your emotions are a product of your experience and not necessarily a product of like what somebody else is doing to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like what we talked about with feelings versus fact.
Yeah, definitely.
It plays a lot into that. Like whenever you have really good emotional awareness, I think it makes it easier to differentiate feelings versus facts.
Yeah.
Because you're able to see, okay, sometimes I have feelings that aren't based on fact or aren't based on like what we talked about being rational. Sometimes our feelings are irrational.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to admit, but when you really, you know, sit down and think about it, like sometimes you overreact. Like I think we all overreact sometimes.
Yeah, I think we learn how not to overreact by overreacting.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that just by thinking about a time that you've really overreacted, you can see that, you know, you might have not been necessarily aware in the moment, but then later on you can kind of like, I feel like emotional awareness is a little bit easier in hindsight.
Yeah. I think it typically is too. I think it's one of those skills that's like really hard to practice, especially when you're first learning about it too. I remember like when I was first learning about emotional awareness, that it was like you have to go through it to know like what you're experiencing. Like you can't just like, it's not like something you can study, right? It's like not something that you can study from like a book. Like, you know, I mean, I think there's some aspects of it that you can, but within yourself, like it has to come from your own experiences and your own like circumstances. And you have to take time to slow yourself down and realize like what's going on, you know, and get curious with yourself. So it's like, I think it's one of those things that's only learned through like trial and error.
Yeah. But, and I also, did you turn this on? Okay, sorry. And I also think too, with emotional awareness, I think that in regards to other people, I think that it's like so essential to have emotional awareness, because like some level of emotional awareness is necessary like in order to be able to like empathize with people. And I think that in relationships, like if there is a large lack of empathy, like it's so hurtful to relationships, because if you are completely like neglecting someone else's feelings or someone else's emotions, and you're not understanding like what they might be going through just because like you're not going through it. That's something I feel like about emotional awareness. It's like being able to be aware and to understand like someone else's emotions, even if they're not like the same as yours, you know?
Yeah. I think that's like why therapy is such a like beneficial experience for a lot of people, is because you get to have that emotional awareness with somebody else gets to is like willing to have emotional awareness of you. You know, it's like,
yeah, that's a good point.
you know, I think it's a lot of times we go through our lives and like, cause it's not like your job to be like aware of other people's emotions. Now it is beneficial. And I think it's a very good, like healthy way to connect with people. And at the same time too, like I think we out on that so much in society, because I think society is so like action based that it forgets about what is happening underneath the actions.
Yeah.
And so we like are so fast paced that like when you're in therapy, you slow down and you like look at what's underneath, what's like up here going on. Right. So
That's a good point, because I do feel like therapy has been one of the, like, maybe not the first time, but like one of the more intense like moments, like was like the beginning of when I started therapy. And like, you know, my therapist would ask me questions about like the way, you know, you hear the cliche of like therapists saying like, how does that make you feel? But it's like it really is, whenever you actually take it seriously and think about, you know, like, how did that make me feel? There's huge things that have happened in my life, like to me, that were very serious parts of my life, and like I never even really like delved into like how I felt. Like I really just thought like, in like,
you're so focused on like
like what happened
and what you think about what happened that you don't like dig into the feelings of it.
And I think that's something that's like, my therapist will be like, well, like, what did you like think about that moment, think about like how you felt. And it was like sometimes the first time I had ever done that, even though I've thought about a certain experience like so many times, I didn't actually think, like, I didn't put a name to the feelings of like what I felt.
Yeah. And I think that's another reason why emotional awareness is so important, because I think emotional awareness is healing. Like having emotional awareness is a healing process.
And it helps you have like self-compassion too.
Yes.
Whenever you like put a name to the emotion. And you know, sometimes I think like, I always thought it was like hard to have self-compassion, because I thought it was like the same as like self-pity, you know, like I was like, oh, I feel sorry for myself and I don't want to do that.
Right.
But I think that like having compassion for yourself kind of takes a certain level of emotional awareness, because you have to understand what you went through and like how you felt, and then you develop compassion surrounding like whatever happened to you or what you went through the experience.
Yeah, I really like that, you know, the idea of having self-compassion, because that's something I think we miss out on a lot. Like a lot of the times too, I think when we think we spend any time focusing on ourselves, that it's a selfish thing, it's not a healthy thing, when in reality it's actually one of the healthiest things that you can do, is to like spend time with yourself, just a little bit of time with yourself a day, and just like just validating your own existence and like your experiences, and finding it in yourself to have that, and not necessarily depending on it from other people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And like, I think something that, you know, have you seen those little like journals that people do where like they'll shade in like how they felt that day, like whether like they're like happy or sad, or like they had a stressful day or whatever, and like their main emotion was. I just think that's interesting, because I feel like sometimes, like, you know, everybody asks each other like, oh, how's your day today, whatever. And I feel like that's something that like you and I are really good at. Like we ask each other like how our day is, but we answer like in a legit way. We're not just like, oh, my day was good, how about yours? Like we're like, oh, today I have felt like this way, and I've, you know, whatever, like I was just telling you today or yesterday, like I was like, I'm feeling very overwhelmed, like, and I feel like we tell each other like our specific emotions and like how we're feeling, and it's like a, you know, it's a helpful check-in whenever you actually, you know, put a name to what you're feeling, instead of just saying like, oh, I'm feeling okay today, or I've had a good day or a bad day. You know, like explaining further is helpful. And I think that like being able to recognize what's the main emotion that you have been feeling in a day, can be helpful too. And just like practicing recognizing those emotions. Because I know for me, for a long time, it was like really hard to even know anything past like, oh, I feel fine, or I feel good, or I feel bad.
How did you learn to process those emotions and like develop that emotional awareness essentially?
Probably therapy.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's a great tool.
Yeah. I'm sure you think so.
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah. No, I think it was. I think it was just like being in therapy and being like, first of all, seeing more of like a point to it, like that it's actually helpful. And then just like going from there and like like putting it into practice more, and like trying to think further into like the way that I feel rather than like, because I think my therapist, if I remember correctly, she kind of told me that like I will like talk a lot about something that happened, or like what somebody said to me or whatever, but then like I just stop there. Like I don't ever say like how it made me feel. Like I don't follow it up with that. And so she would always kind of like teach me to follow it up with like, okay, and then like what things, like what emotions were you feeling? And that's like, I like the way she words it too. Instead of saying like, she doesn't really normally say like, how did it make you feel? She normally like says like, what emotions were coming up for you? And that's something that, you know, is really helpful. And kind of like you talk about, like she talks about like feeling it in your body, which also helps, just because then you can learn like your body better and where you feel certain emotions. And I feel like that's another whole piece of emotional awareness, is like in your body.
Yeah, I do talk about like in your body, being in your body a lot, and like connecting the mind and the body, because I do think that's a crucial part of emotional awareness that I think is a little bit more difficult to practice, honestly, you know, because it's hard to like sit down and like make time for that. But it's really not. Like, it's really not, though. You know, it's about prioritizing it. In all honesty, it's like finding that in yourself to like prioritize, you know, your own emotional awareness and connecting your mind and your body, you know, sitting down like in the shower, or not sitting down in the shower, but like maybe in the shower, you like do a quick like body scan, body check, like which parts of your body are tired. I wonder what emotions are sitting there. You know, I remember like for me, I had like a really overwhelming day at work, and I came home and I had all these plans for the day, and I like just didn't do any of them. And
I love when that happens.
Yeah, I like laid in my bed. I like got home, and I actually went to the guest bedroom, because I love our guest bedroom because it's so peaceful.
Yeah, I love your guest bedroom as well.
And so I like just laid down in the guest bedroom, and I like literally like lay, like it was such a surreal experience for me, even though I know it's probably going to sound like just average, but I just like laid down in bed, and I just like stared at the ceiling, and I just like really just was like let myself be in my body, because I think we spend so much of our day in our heads, like what's for dinner, what am I going to do with the dogs, how am I going to take care of the cats, what about the kids, like what about the laundry, what if my husband needs something, what if my wife needs something, what about this book that I want to read, what are my deadlines for work tomorrow, right? Like all these things, like easily I think we can all like go into our heads really quickly, because I know I do that. But to really slow down and just be like present in my body, and like truly just feel my body in this world existing. And like, I just like broke down. I like remember I was like laying on the bed, and I just started sobbing, and like, you know,
but that says a lot. That just goes to show like how you weren't like letting yourself feel, like you had a block there.
Oh, it was huge. And then like, I like cried, and I just let myself cry. Even though like that was the last thing I wanted to do that day, I think in order to move on and process and like be like and find healing in that experience and like what I was like going through at the time, you know, I just listened to my body, and I just really felt like my body was like, I want to take a shower, and I just want to go to bed after this. And like I did that, and I woke up the next day, and I felt so refreshed. Like, I just felt so refreshed the next day.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's like a great example, because I like that's the way that sometimes like I'll feel, you know, guilty if I feel like going to bed really early, because I'm like, okay, well I could get things done, but like I'm just gonna go to bed at like 7. Like that's an interesting choice. Right. But then, you know, like you were saying, like sometimes if you really like take time to connect with your body, like, and connect with your emotions, you'll kind of find out that sometimes what you're feeling like doing, or like what your emotions are telling you to do, is what you need. And that's what I think of whenever you say that about like how you just wanted to shower and to go to bed. It's not always something that you like, your emotions aren't always something you should like fight against and neglect.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times if you listen to your emotions, even if you're like, well, because I have been in that situation before where I've been like, well, I've been getting enough sleep, like I don't need extra sleep, but like my body knows that I do. It's like you're tired, that's making you even more emotional, like you just need to go to bed. And then if I do, like you said, like I feel great the next morning, and you did need the extra sleep. And so, instead of trying to like make logical sense of your emotions, like just like, sometimes listen to them and go to bed. Go to bed whenever you
go to bed. Put yourself to sleep.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I do think it's difficult though to like to sit down, because I know, I mean, for me, I mean, I'm talking about it like I just laid there and I just had an experience. And like,
yeah, it's harder said than done.
It's a lot harder said than done. And so I think it's also, I just want to validate too that it's not, I mean, I had worked on that for a year and I'm still working on it. I think it's something that's like not super easy. And so to just bringing back into the picture that sometimes just sitting with yourself is like actually one of the hardest things to do. And, not because you like don't like yourself, but I think it's just, we live in a world that's like I just said, it's like all about moving and going and like, what are you going to do next? And, focusing on the world instead of like focusing on, what you're experiencing and like what's going on inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of things that can be difficult about emotional awareness, which is why like I feel like we as people in general like just tend to neglect our emotions and like avoid them. And I think that like one of the bigger things that I think about is that which even whenever I first decided to go to therapy, I was like didn't really want to go because I was like, there's things, which I'm sure you hear this, but it's like there's things that I didn't want to like confront. It's so funny when I say that word.
Your mind?
But there's things I didn't want to confront because I was like avoiding them for so long, and I was like scared of what emotions would come up, and how strong I was scared of how like I knew those emotions would be strong.
Right.
And so I just wanted to avoid them like for the rest of my life. Like seriously.
No, I mean, I think that's a good point, because I think a lot of the times, like what I said in the beginning, like why it's so important is also like why it's so difficult too, is because emotions are so intense. Like, and if we become aware of it, we think that we have to do things with it. Yeah. But in reality, it's more so about how do you manage like your emotions, right? Yeah. That's why emotional awareness is like key. It's like, it's like really scary to think about like, oh gosh, like this is so hard to feel. If I feel this, like I'm gonna have to like hurt whoever, like who hurt whoever like I would experience this with, and I felt this way because of this, and like, or like what if I can't handle it if I feel it, like what if this breaks me?
Yeah, and that's something interesting, and I think something that I figured out by finally confronting some of the things that I had avoided for so long is it's really interesting because I feel like whenever, and I know we've talked about this too, because it's there's still things that I like do like hold in my little box that I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. Yeah. But, and I want to avoid that. But like, I think we all avoid like certain things in our lives, or, we don't want to like talk through certain things, or we don't want to process certain things. And I know for me, like, especially in therapy, like there's certain things I didn't want to talk about because I was like, oh, well, I'm going to have a breakdown, or I'm going to cry a lot or whatever. And I think that I kind of learned from processing certain things and talking about certain things and just bringing them to the surface that a lot of times like it really does like feel so much better once you like bring it up, and it allows it to like come out, and I think that's something that like I realize is that whenever you're holding on to something and avoiding feeling it, you're still paying for that, like you're still like that's causing you to have a negative emotion. Yeah. So it's not like avoiding it, you're just like avoiding feeling bad. You know what I mean? Like you're still hurting yourself. Yeah,
because I was gonna say too, like a big part of it, it's like when you hide things, or like when you're avoiding it, I call it hiding too. It's like, it's hurt, it like it's just exactly like what you said, you're only hurting yourself in the end. Like you're not giving yourself the opportunity to like find balance or to like give somebody the benefit of the doubt. Because like a lot of the times if we're not emotionally aware, we often place that on other people. And I think that can be one of those like difficult things about it, is that a lot of times we have to confront ourselves with our emotions, and like being like emotionally aware. It's like, am I being emotionally aware, or am I projecting my emotions onto somebody else?
Yeah. And that's like,
And assuming their like ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. That's a huge part of it, is that we tend to like assume that like we know what other people are thinking.
Yeah.
And that's something we kind of mentioned in one of our previous, I don't remember which one, if that was feelings versus facts or healthy confrontation, I don't know. But you know, I think that like a lot of times I know that I think most people do like assume that we know what other people are feeling or what they're thinking, or we just judge off of like something that they'll say something, and so we'll make a judgment and think like, okay, because they said this, they must be feeling this, or they must mean this by that. And I think that that's like a hard part of not being emotionally aware of like other people, and that aware that they can have their own emotions.
Right. Yeah. I agree with
And like
that.
most of the time people don't have the same emotions. Like I don't have the same emotions as you do.
No, you don't.
Are you all right over there?
Like trying to get comfy. Every time I move my head, my cord, my headset cord is like gets caught on the something, and I'm like,
I saw you over there like pausing.
I got a little distracted, I'm not gonna lie. But I agree with you. I think it's like giving, you know, taking it a step further too, is like allowing people to disappoint you too. You know, I think a lot of times with emotional awareness, like we're scared, and so we make those decisions for people like, oh, I'm not going to invite them to my party because they're just not going to come because they're flaky, or, you know, or it's like, I'm not going to ask him about this because he will get upset and like it starts a fight, or like, I'm not going to like try not to sneeze.
No, I had to yawn.
Oh, okay. Or like, you know, it's like those kind of things where you like assume people's responses, and it's honestly kind of scarier to think like, what if I talk to them about this, and like what if I like bring this like emotional reaction to the surface and like bring it, like be aware of it with this person,
because people will surprise you sometimes, and they'll like, react a lot better than you thought.
Exactly. And like but it is really scary to think about like, well, what if they only confirm my fears and like my thoughts around it, you know, like like it's really scary to think about being vulnerable with somebody and then being like, that's sorry, but that's not sorry, you know, kind of thing. Like, actually, it's your fault that like whenever I hit you with my car, it upsets you. Like, I know that's extreme, but like, you know, it's like one of those things where it's like gaslighting is a good example of it. You know, it's like, it's scary to be vulnerable with people, but it also is like that key to like emotional awareness, I think, is being willing to confront yourself and be like vulnerable with yourself, but also like being comfortable with yourself. So
yeah, and I think too, a piece of emotional awareness that reminded me whenever you brought it up is like being able to or something that can help you establish more emotional awareness in regards to other people is just like having those like open conversations. Because then like whenever you kind of like face the fear of talking to somebody and you've been like coming up with a scenario in your head, and then you're like, hey, I just wanted to talk to you about the way that you feel about whatever. Like, how do you actually feel about that? And then you listen with an open mind. You can learn that you're wrong, and that, you know, whenever you assume somebody's feelings, like they are often wrong. And
I always like to say like, or I do really like to say like, give people the opportunity to surprise you, you know, don't make those choices for them. Like that's what I work on a lot, is like not, when you assume, you're making that choice for them.
Yeah. And that's why like you included, but I've had like certain friends that like I've told them, you know, about a conversation between like me and someone else, and then like they'll like, I'll say like, oh yeah, and then they, you know, they like, I don't know how I'm trying to say it, but like you'll say something for them, but then like they'll be like, well, did they actually say that, you know?
Yeah.
And that's you know, going back to the whole like what actually happened versus like what are you like making up. Not that you're lying, but like you're in your head, it's true to you. but you know, you're like, oh yeah, that's a good example. Whenever I'm telling you a story about an argument, you know, say between like me and Bradley, and if I said like, oh yeah, he was really mad at me, like he did not want to like be with me like for the rest of the day, and then like you could say like, well, did he say that to you, you know? And I feel like that's happened before where like I'm like, oh well, like no, I guess not. And it's like funny because it's so strong, like the things that you make up are like so strong. Because like you said, like emotions are very strong.
Yeah. Emotions are super strong. It's really important to be able to have the language around it too. And like, you know, get curious with yourself.
Yeah. And like ask people the questions, you know, like, is this how you're feeling? Like even it's okay too to like, it's okay to label like the feelings that you think somebody is having, but it's like, phrase it as a question, you know, say like, okay, like to me, like, I feel like you're appearing very angry. Are you angry? And that way, you know.
I know like something that like in the very beginning of like mine and Giannis's relationship, like I used to like almost constantly ask him like, are you angry with me? Like, are you angry with me? You know, because of things. And not because of him, it was like because of other things that have happened. But I was like I was very worried about that attachment, right? I wanted to make sure that attachment was secure and good and safe, and like I would do anything in my power to make sure we had a good attachment. But by doing that, I also take away his ability to decide like if the attachment isn't for him. But even going back to that example, like, are you angry with me? Are you angry with me? Did I do something to upset you? Kind of stuff. Like, you know, instead of doing that, like, because half the time he was like not ever angry with me. I just like we were just like sitting in the quiet of each other's like, lives, and like that's totally okay, right? And then we like talked about it. He was like, hey, like that actually like upsets me when you ask me that question, because then I'm like, do I look angry? Like, am I giving off vibes that I'm angry to Jolyn? You know, like, and you know, I think even just being like emotionally aware to say like, hey, I'm feeling insecure right now. Are you happy with me? Or like, how are you feeling towards me right now?
Like leaving it open-ended instead of like a yes or no.
Exactly. Like he was like, ask me like how I'm feeling. Don't tell me like what you think I'm feeling, you know?
Yeah, that's good.
So
I like that.
I think that's another way too to do it. You know, I think even like, you know, but that was like obviously like an extreme version. I think of like me being like, are you angry with me? And like very rarely was he angry with me. And not that it like, you know, but also it like, I think it can impact too, like, well, maybe he didn't feel like okay to be angry with me because I was so worried about it. And like, that's just also like, you want to be able to allow people to have their own emotional experience and have their own emotional awareness. And like, by being aware of your own emotions, because like to me, I was like, oh, I'm not insecure. I'm totally good. But in fact, I was insecure because I have an insecure, anxious, avoidant attachment style. So
I love that for you.
So your girlie does act on it, but she's growing, you know. I don't do that anymore, so I don't do it as often. So
which is like helpful for him to, you know, say like help, you know, it suggests something else to do, because that's always helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, like being able to have those conversations with people, and giving them the opportunity to be like, hey, like, can you actually ask this to me in a different way? Or like, you know, whatever it is, you know, is helpful. Yeah. Because that's like one of the ways to implement it and to like put it into practice is like start having conversations about it.
Yeah. And I think something else too that I just wanted to mention is like a little bit different of a piece of emotional awareness, but like sometimes whenever I think about emotional awareness, I also just think about like how much you naturally like pick up on other people's emotions and like and care about them. Like, you know, some of us are a little bit more sensitive to like the way that others like are acting or feeling or whatever. And I think that like I do think it's very important, because it's something I've worked on a lot. I think it's very important to just like, you know, we always talk about like the balance aspect for these values, but I think it's really important to find the balance of like, yes, it's important to be sensitive to the emotions of others, but there is like a line where it can cross the line of like not being healthy. Yeah. Where that's something where I like have, you know, like I always, or I guess I should say I used to, like I was really it was hard for me not to try to like take on the emotions of other people, and just like if they were like having a bad day, like I would like kind of try to bring myself down to like what they were experiencing. And I thought that was like a good thing to do, because I'm like, exactly, I learned. But you know, it's like I thought that I was like being there for them, and I was like, wow, I'm being a good friend or a good family member or a good wife or whatever. It's like, if you're down, I'm down too. Like, I'm gonna get in the trenches with you.
No.
But it's like it's not actually helpful. And
no,
I mean,
well, it's like needing that emotional awareness enough in yourself to be like, they can be upset and I can be happy, and it doesn't take away from either
and I think
of us.
that's what I want to like make sure, like that's something that I wanted to touch on, because like I used to get confused and thought like emotional awareness was like I thought I was like, yeah, I'm so good, I'm so emotionally aware because I'm so aware of others' emotions, right? And it's like, yeah, like
that's incorrect.
Like that's
well, that's a part of it.
Yeah, like it's like it is good to be able to be aware of what other people are feeling, and that way like you understand that your friend is in a low place, and you're not like, yeah, let's like go get dinner, and like, you know, they're not even wanting to like get off the couch. So it's like it's good to be able to recognize that. But like you like nowhere in the definition like did it say, it said recognize, but it doesn't say like you need to like get on the same level as everybody else in order to do the right thing. And you know, a lot of times like it's like that doesn't really help anybody.
No. Yeah. How did you find that balance?
You asked me so many hard questions. Next. No,
thank you.
No, I'm good. I think like just realizing that I mean, it took a really long time, and I'm still not good at it sometimes, but I think just like realizing that you are able, like you can still support somebody and like not like, so I mean, sometimes it's okay to like cry with a friend or whatever. I'm not saying that you never should do that, but I think that I realized that like I think I thought, let me get my thoughts straight. I thought that if, to give an example, if you come to me crying and like I don't like, you know, feel sad with you and like take on that with you, and then like, you know, check in with you, like text you the next day, like, are you feeling better? Like, you know, keep up with you. Like, I just like thought that it was being a bad friend. And I think I just realized that, you know, like I've done a lot in realizing that like, you know, I am my own person. Like we are having separate experiences, like responsibility. That's what it is. There it is. Yeah. Like it's like that I'm not responsible. And as much as I like can have empathy for my friends and that I can care for my friends or my family or my husband, I like am not responsible for their emotions. And that's been like the biggest thing for me, is just like constantly reminding myself. Like for the longest I had to just continuously tell myself like, that's not your responsibility.
Right. Yeah. I think that's something I relate to as well.
Yeah. And it's something that like my therapist like helped me a lot with too, is like, you know, there are things where she would like shock me by saying that, because I would be like, yeah, and like I don't know what to do because, you know, this person is experiencing this and like I can't help them. And she's like, but why is that your job? Like, and I was like, oh, okay, thanks, you know.
True.
But it's such a simple thing, but it's hard to remember.
I think even like it's making me think of like another way to implement this is like by also implementing boundaries.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Boundaries is really good. Yeah. Exactly. Like it's just not your responsibility.
Yeah. Like that is not yours. Like let it go. You can't cross that fence because it's not your fence.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so I think like with emotional awareness, it's good to like, I like that the word is aware, because like it's good to be aware of other people's emotions, but it doesn't mean that you have to like carry them.
Yes. I like that differentiation there.
Yeah.
And I think another way to practice it is like, you know, talking things through with people.
Yeah.
And I know we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think talking things through with people.
And people who are like a safe space too. Like I think it matters who you talk it through with, because sometimes it can do like have the opposite effect if you're talking to the wrong person. God, yeah, but if you're talking to the right person, you know, and they're a safe space and they like will help you to like challenge your thoughts.
Right. Yeah. I think, you know, that's why earlier when I mentioned like going to therapy as a good way to like work through it is because it's because that's a safe person. And then like also finding like, you know, good like people that you feel comfortable and you can trust is also really important.
Yeah.
You know, but even like learning how to trust yourself with it, you know, I know like journaling is one of those things.
Yeah.
I like to walk, like personally, even if I know Tiffany and I walk together a lot, but also like, walking on my own is something that I find very healing. Exercising. I mean, meditation is something that's really big for me. And I've mentioned that before as well. But yeah, like being able to dig into like you.
Yeah. And just like all of those are so great. And like within all of those too, like if you're journaling or if you're talking to a friend, just like utilizing, like really working on practicing naming the emotions and talking about the way that you feel, and not just talking about like what happened, but really like getting into your emotions and like practicing, even if you like say the wrong emotion, like I've done that before. Like I've worked on it and like said, like, oh yeah, and that made me feel this. And then I'm like, no, that's actually not how I felt. And so, it's okay to like mess it up too. And then you can like try, like, I think you've said before, like you can like try on an emotion almost and like, or like try on a word and like be like, no, that's not it. Let me try this one. And then like you kind of find what feels right for you. But that's how I feel about, emotional awareness. 'Cause it's like, as you're practicing becoming aware of your own emotions, sometimes it just takes practice to actually know, like even know what you're feeling.
Yeah, I like that too. I think it's one of those things that it takes time to give yourself time, give yourself grace, but also don't give up on it. It's one of those things like we talked about at the beginning, like why it is so important is because like it does affect so many aspects of our life. It affects our relationships, the way we view the world, our own actions too. And so like, giving yourself that space to really explore it, I think is really healing.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
But other than that, do you have anything else to add?
No, do you?
Nor. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. And if you like this episode, like, share, subscribe.
Yeah.
All the things.
All the good things.
At Confront Your Mind on all platforms.
Yes.
And email. Gmail.
Yes.
Gmail, that is.
Gmail. And then
confrontyourmind@gmail.com.
Yes, that's it. That's the one right there. That's the one. That's the one. Just remember that we're all learning.
And don't be afraid to get confrontational this week.
Keep it cute until we meet again.
Bye.
Bye.